But at some point, the next step of progression has to be quit doing dumb things. You're forcing the issue and you don't have to. So if he could just eliminate or at least cut those mistakes in half, then he could become a very productive player in this league. But at this point, he's more similar to Jameis Winston than he is to some of the greats in the league.
The tape is really good there. It really is sort of a Charles Dickens, best of times, worst of times microcosm of everything we've seen in his career. So let me now come over here where Mike Tannenbaum and Dan Graziano are with me. And Graz, let me start with you because the Giants have one win, which means they could very easily find themselves at the end of this season in position to consider drafting one of the big quarterbacks who might be in this draft. What is your sense of how committed they are to Daniel Jones at this stage?
I think they like Daniel Jones. They like his aggressiveness. They like his talent. They hate the turnovers. I mean, there's no way around it. So they need to iron that out. But as of now, they still believe he has the ability to be their franchise quarterback for the long term. They recognize that the group around him is not what they want it to be, what it would be if they were going to put him in the best possible position to succeed. So my understanding is their focus is on improving that group around him while they work with a 23-year-old quarterback to figure out how he can eliminate the mistakes.
Who, again, they drafted number 6 overall just a year ago. Mike Tannenbaum, my general manager. What would you be thinking if you were sitting in that chair right now, evaluating Daniel Jones and looking at the quarterbacks who will be in this draft?
Yeah, I thought Greg nailed it, which is there's a lot of good on Daniel Jones, and then there's these massive mistakes. It really reminds me of Mark Sanchez, where we're playing and we're doing well, and then there's 1 or 2 plays a game, Greeny, where you're like, oh my God, I can't believe you just did that. And let me tell you, as a general manager, that does 2 things: less hair and more weight. So I'm sure I know what Dave Gettleman's feeling this morning. And then to spin the story forward, I think there's something known now as the Cliff Kingsbury phenomenon in the NFL, which is this. Josh Rosen is a top 10 pick. A year later, Cliff Kingsbury comes in. They jettison Rosen. They draft Kyle Murray, and the rest is history. I think the standard by which Daniel Jones will be held accountable is higher because George Judge did not draft Daniel Jones, and therefore, if I was them, I would draft Justin Fields from Ohio State. He's a better athlete. He's more accurate. He makes less mistakes. And if you said I could either have Jones or Fields for the next 10 years, if I'm the Giants, I'm taking Fields.
Okay, again, if Lawrence is available, that almost seems like a foregone conclusion. Fields would be the interesting one if he's available.
Yeah, and we don't know what the status is going to be of Dave Gettleman, the GM, who did draft Daniel Jones. Will they move on from him at the end of the year? Who's going to be making this decision? But Mike's point, those Mark Sanchez teams you guys had were really, really good around the quarterback, right? The Giants are in a much different situation with Daniel Jones in terms of the ability to make him look good.
That's fair, but they do have the one win, and those teams went to championship games. So a lot there to unpack. Let's see what they wind up doing as it goes on. Meanwhile, speaking of young quarterbacks, Tua making his NFL debut as a starter Sunday in a win against the Rams in which he only threw for 93 yards. And then Shefty reported that the Dolphins made him the starter in part because they have the Texans' first-round pick, and they could wind up getting one of these quarterbacks too. Here's the assessment of Tua from his head coach.
Some good plays, some bad plays. We're making the corrections now. A lot of things we can get fixed. Again, his first time out. Again, some good, some bad, and hopefully we see some improvement next week.
So again, I mean, I can't even believe we're having this conversation, but this seems to be where we are. Are we really watching what amounts to a 9-game tryout for Tua and the Dolphins?
I think when you look at what Adam reported on Sunday, I think the key thing to remember, this is part of the calculation, right? You're perpetually a big picture thinking organization. So, if you get to the end of the season and you have an opportunity to take a Trevor Lawrence, do you do, to Mike's point, what the Cardinals did, right, with Josh Rosen and with Kyler Murray? Extreme case, obviously, but you want to be in a position to have your evaluation made if you do end up there. Look, Tua is a guy the Dolphins had their eye on for more than a year. They end up getting him. Obviously, they think very highly of him, and they're not sitting here thinking, oh, he might fail. We may have to be in a position to get a quarterback. But they have their pick. They have Houston's pick. They may have the ability to do a lot in the first round, and they need to be able to accurately assess what they have on their roster.
Again, the Texans have one win. That pick could wind up being in that territory where the big quarterbacks in this draft might be. So, Mike Tannenbaum, back to you. Same question. How do you read the way this is breaking out with the Dolphins right now?
I think it was predetermined, Greeny, and here's what I mean by that. We got to keep in mind, ordinarily there's 4 preseason games, so it was clear to me they were waiting until the bye week, so that would have really been after the second regular season game. And I think they handled it much better than Cincinnati. Cincinnati got rid of a great bridge quarterback in Andy Dalton, and despite Joe Burrow playing well, he's taking a lot of hits, and that's unnecessary if he's your guy for 10 years. So I think what Miami did was they looked at the schedule, they said, we'll put him in after the bye week, and now we have plenty of time to evaluate him. And I don't think that it was about the injury because, as Coach Parcells would say, the time to get nervous is before you place the bet, not once the wheel is spinning. So if I'm the Dolphins, I made my bed, I drafted Tua, he's my guy, and I'm going to put him in. And that defense is carrying their team. The defense is playing exceptionally well. They have room to let him grow and improve during the season.
This was my favorite story of the weekend. So let me bring the rest of the football crew back in here, if I can, guys, because I think there's so much to unpack in this with all the different possibilities that are going on here. Greg, let's start with you on the quarterbacking piece of it. Just going back to the evaluations on Tua. He didn't give you anything on Sunday to make any sort of a judgment one way or the other. He was barely even involved in the game, as crazy as that sounds. What is your sense of the Dolphins and the decision they may have the opportunity to make at the end of this year?
If for whatever reason they wind up with the #1 overall pick, you have to take Trevor Lawrence. You have to. This guy is a generational talent that checks every single box from a maturity standpoint to a physical skill set standpoint, size, speed, athleticism, accuracy, you name it. He's the best quarterback prospect coming out since Andrew Luck. So if he's available and you're on the clock, you got to take him, regardless of what you see from Tua. However, I think Tua and Justin Fields are comparable prospects. I think Lawrence is in a little bit of a class of his own. Fields and Tua, I think, have both shown me enough, both in their college career, and I guess it's early for Tua, and like you said, last week's not really any indicator of success. But I think those two are comparable. If you feel a little better about Justin Fields because of his durability, then I could understand why the Dolphins might make that decision. But to me, I would not give up on Tua in favor of Fields. However, I would potentially consider that possibility if, in fact, I was on the clock with Trevor Lawrence still available.
And then, Jeff, let me come to you on the other side of this, which is, now that's a team that is very much in the thick of a playoff chase, maybe in the division, certainly in a conference where you're going to have 7 playoff teams this year. So if you're an offensive lineman in that team and you're hearing that reporting, that's at least part of the thinking at this stage of the season. What thought goes through your mind?
Yeah, we're winning now, right? And Tua's our guy. I think as you're looking at it from a locker room perspective, as you're not hearing the noise about what draft pick is coming in, you have no idea where you're going to draft. All that kind of nonsense handles itself. But from moving over to Tua, why did you make the move, right? You know what Fitzpatrick is, right? He's a hot and cold guy. He can play great for 6-7 games, and he can give you some bad games. They bring Tua in because of his accuracy. And by the way, Greeny, their receivers, I think, get the least amount of separation in the league. So if you need an accurate guy who can move, this offensive line is beginning to get around and come around. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to move around in the pocket. They're winning on defense and special teams. You know, basically 3 scores last week. I know one with the 1-yard line. But as a football team, you are laser focused on Tua taking your team to the playoffs and making a run with this defense and riding that momentum you have right now.
Put a ribbon on it for me, Swagoo. What do you think of it all?
Yeah, I think you're still dealing with an unknown. As much as I want to see Tua have success, we don't know if he's going to be good enough in order to get this team where they need to go. And I know the idea about Fitzpatrick. I was in the league when Ryan was in the league and now watching him. But you look at the way he was playing, and it's perplexing that they took him out at that juncture, especially when you're talking about a team that we see ascending on the opposite side of the football. The comfort level that the Miami Dolphins have to have with Tua is based on practice, not games. In the first game, obviously, it was a lot left to be desired. And it's what you expect playing against a Rams team that can get after the quarterback. Here's the thing, though, guys. Like, I don't want to read into too much into this, but even when this decision was made and then just watching Flores just now, I just don't see the enthusiasm of playing your young quarterback that you took 5th overall. It seems like it's an evaluation process, like Shefty said, like Tannenbaum said, as opposed to saying this is the direction we're going, and this is where we will be for the next foreseeable future. We're talking about Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields and the potential of getting those guys. I would personally take both of them over Tua, and the durability would be a huge situation for me, Greg, as far as you talking about Justin Fields, and also just looking at the trends of the league. This is a hard one for me to understand because you're subjecting an evaluation to the opportunity of winning, getting in the playoffs and continuing to win games.
As I say, there's a lot there to unpack. It's a fascinating story. We'll continue to follow it. Meanwhile, coming up, we are about halfway through the season.